The harsh command sliced through the quiet pharmacy like a blade. "Get your black ass away from that counter!" Officer Nolan Pierce lunged forward and shoved Judge Vivian Langford against the wall with sudden, brutal force. Her 68-year-old frame slammed into the metal shelving with a heavy, echoing thud that filled the entire CVS. Her prescription bottle flew from her hand, the bright orange plastic spinning wildly through the air before it shattered on the floor. Pills scattered everywhere. Tiny white tablets of lisinopril, 10 milligrams each. Her husband's precious heart medication now rolling beneath display racks and the shoes of strangers like forgotten marbles. Her reading glasses slipped from her face, the silver chain catching on her collar for a moment before the frames clattered to the tile. One lens cracked on impact, a delicate spiderweb of fractures spreading across the glass. It was the kind of sound that told you something had broken that might never be whole again. "I'm just getting my husband's medication," Vivian said, her voice steady even as pain lanced through her shoulder. "Shut your mouth, Grandma," Pierce growled, twisting her arm behind her back with a wrench that sent white-hot agony shooting down her spine. His breath was hot and angry against her ear, his grip like iron on her wrist. "You people always have some sob story." The handcuffs appeared in a flash, their sharp metallic click cutting through the pharmacy's afternoon stillness. He snapped them shut around her wrists with unnecessary force, the cold steel biting deep into her skin, cruel and unyielding. Vivian gasped as the cuffs tightened and cut off her circulation. Her wedding ring, a simple gold band that had seen 47 years of marriage, pressed painfully against the unyielding metal. Customers froze mid-step. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, cameras already recording. Some stared in open shock, mouths agape. Others looked away, uneasy witnesses to a scene they wished they could unsee. A few, to their lasting shame, actually laughed. An elderly black woman being brutalized in one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods, treated like a common criminal, and some found it entertaining. "Please, officer, you're hurting me," Vivian said, her voice quieter now, but still firm with dignity. "Good," Pierce replied, a cruel smile visible to everyone watching. "Maybe you'll learn your place." But Vivian Langford had spent decades learning her place in this world. 23 of those years had been spent on the federal bench, presiding over hundreds of criminal cases, sentencing corrupt officers, hearing civil rights matters, and upholding the very laws this man was now trampling. Her place was not on her knees before a racist cop who had no idea he had just made the worst mistake of his life. What she revealed next would destroy his world in ways he could never have imagined. Vivian Langford had begun that morning like any other in her 47 years of marriage. Coffee brewed in the kitchen as the first light filtered through the magnolia trees outside their Buckhead townhouse. She poured 2 cups, one for herself, black with a half teaspoon of sugar, and one for Walter, her husband of nearly 5 decades, with cream and 2 sugars, the way he had liked it since 1977. She cut the toast into perfect triangles, just as he preferred. It was a small ritual she had learned in their first year of marriage and had never forgotten. After his stroke 6 months earlier, these quiet acts of care had become even more precious, anchors in a life that had suddenly grown fragile and uncertain. The morning news played softly in the background. Outside, the magnolia trees rustled in the breeze. Neighbors waved from their porches. This was Buckhead, where million-dollar homes lined tree-shaded streets, and people believed safety came with wealth. Walter's heart medication had run low the day before. Vivian had noticed the nearly empty orange bottle on the kitchen counter beside the pill organizer she filled every week. His cardiologist, Dr. Elias Bennett, had been clear about the importance of consistency. Missing even 1 dose could be dangerous. Walter's heart was already weakened from the stroke. Any disruption could trigger another cardiac event. "I'll get it today," Vivian had promised, kissing his forehead as he settled into his favorite leather chair by the window, the one where the light was perfect for his crossword puzzles. Walter had smiled, the left side of his mouth still slightly drooping from the stroke, but his eyes warm with the same love she had fallen for decades ago. 47 years together, and she had never broken a promise to him. She wasn't about to start now. The pharmacy on Peachtree Road sat in the heart of Buckhead, just a short drive from their home. Vivian had been coming there for years, ever since Walter's health began its slow decline. The staff knew her well. Tyrone Ellis, the manager, a kind man in his 40s with graying temples and a warm smile, always asked about Walter's progress, how his physical therapy was going, whether his speech had improved. Maya Ellison, the young technician with bright red hair and freckles across her nose, remembered that Vivian preferred large print labels on Walter's prescriptions. She had started printing them that way without being asked, a small kindness Vivian never forgot. This wasn't some tense inner-city drugstore. This was Buckhead, where federal judges shopped alongside executives and professors. A woman like Vivian Langford belonged here, even if some people couldn't see past the color of her skin. Vivian arrived at the pharmacy that afternoon, a little early, as was her habit. Punctuality had been drilled into her during law school and reinforced through decades on the bench. The pharmacy was busy but orderly, with the usual crowd of retirees and parents picking up prescriptions before school pickup. She took her place in line behind a businessman in a gray suit and a young mother bouncing a fussy toddler on her hip. Normal people living normal lives, unaware they were about to witness something that would shake their comfortable assumptions about justice, race, and power. Vivian wore her good navy blazer, the one she had bought for courthouse appearances. Underneath was a simple white blouse and gray slacks. Her reading glasses hung from a silver chain around her neck. Her wedding ring caught the light as she reached into her purse to check Walter's insurance card. The prescription number was memorized. RX 41892, lisinopril 10 milligrams. Take 1 tablet daily with food. Walter's lifeline in an orange plastic bottle. Behind the counter, Tyrone Ellis worked efficiently, counting pills and answering phones. He looked up when Vivian approached, his face already forming his usual warm greeting, ready to ask about Walter. Officer Nolan Pierce had been parked outside, his patrol car idling in a handicapped space, his radio crackling with calls he only half heard. He had received orders to increase arrest numbers. His supervisor, Captain Victor Harlan, had specifically mentioned this pharmacy as a high-activity zone for prescription drug abuse. Pierce had a quota to meet, 3 arrests before his shift ended. 2 down, 1 to go. He had spent the last hour profiling customers through the large front windows, looking for easy targets who wouldn't fight back, who wouldn't know their rights, who would fold under pressure. As Vivian opened the door, the small bell chimed. To her, it was just another routine errand, a simple act of love for her husband of 47 years. To Officer Pierce, it was an opportunity. An elderly black woman, alone, vulnerable, perfect for his arrest statistics. He was about to make the worst decision of his career. Officer Nolan Pierce entered the pharmacy, his polished shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. His body camera blinked red, recording everything. Standard procedure. Though he had learned over 12 years which angles worked best for his reports, which positions hid certain actions. Vivian stood at the prescription counter, reading the medication label carefully through her glasses, her lips moving slightly as she checked the instructions. 10 milligrams of lisinopril once daily with food. Dr. Bennett had emphasized the critical importance of consistent timing. Pierce noticed her immediately. His eyes, shaped by 12 years of patrol work and a worldview warped by prejudice, saw exactly what he wanted to see. An elderly black woman taking too long at the counter, studying the bottle like she was checking for resale value. In his mind, she fit the profile of a drug seeker. "Excuse me, ma'am." His voice carried authority across the quiet pharmacy. "I need to speak with you." Vivian looked up, startled. Her hand instinctively tightened around the prescription bottle. She saw a young white officer, perhaps in his mid-30s, with the swagger that comes from too much power and too little accountability. "Yes, officer," she said, her voice calm and polite. 40 years of navigating systems that often dismissed women who looked like her had taught her the art of measured response. "Is there a problem? What are you doing with that medication?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Other customers paused, sensing tension. The businessman stopped scrolling. The young mother shifted uncomfortably toward the exit. Tyrone Ellis looked up from behind the counter, his expression shifting from routine professionalism to concern. "I'm picking up my husband's heart medication," Vivian explained, her voice still calm despite the anxiety beginning to coil in her stomach. "Lisinopril. He takes it daily for high blood pressure." Pierce stepped closer. "Your husband's medication, or are you planning to sell it?" Vivian's eyebrows furrowed. In all her years growing up in Alabama during segregation, attending law school when black women could be counted on one hand, building a judicial career in a system that questioned her at every turn, she had learned to recognize harassment dressed up as procedure. "Sell it," she repeated, genuine confusion in her voice. "Officer, this is lisinopril. It's for high blood pressure. Why would anyone sell blood pressure medication?" "Don't play dumb with me." Pierce's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "We know what goes on in these pharmacies. Elderly people picking up prescriptions for other people, running pill mills. It's trafficking, pure and simple." The pharmacy fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units and the quiet beep of the cash register where Maya Ellison had stopped counting pills. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," Vivian said, her voice steady, her judicial training kicking in. "I have my husband's insurance card right here. I have his identification. I have a medical power of attorney giving me legal authority to pick up his prescriptions. Everything is completely legal and documented." Pierce adjusted his body camera subtly, angling it away. Vivian caught the movement. She had seen it before in courtroom footage of excessive force cases. "That's exactly what someone running a pill mill would say," Pierce replied. His hand moved to his belt where the handcuffs hung. "Turn around and put your hands on the counter now." Vivian's eyes widened. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. Hands on the counter now." Tyrone Ellis cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Officer, Mrs. Langford is a regular customer here. She comes in monthly for her husband's medication. We've never had any issues. Her prescriptions are always legitimate. We have complete documentation, sir." Pierce cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Step back from the counter. This is police business, and unless you want to be arrested for interfering with an investigation, I suggest you stay out of it." The threat hung in the air. Tyrone's hands shook as he retreated, knowing intervention could cost him everything. But every instinct screamed that this was wrong, an abuse of power disguised as law enforcement. Pierce reached for his handcuffs. "Mrs. Langford, turn around. Hands behind your back. I won't ask again." Vivian's hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from a familiar anger she had kept carefully controlled for 7 decades. An anger that came from being constantly questioned, constantly suspected, constantly treated as guilty simply because of the color of her skin. "Officer Pierce," she said, reading his name tag carefully, committing it to memory the way she had committed thousands of case details to memory over her career. "I'm going to ask you to reconsider your actions. Think very carefully about what you're doing right now." Pierce smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you threatening me? Because that's obstruction of justice. That's another charge I can add." "I'm not threatening anyone," Vivian replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm simply suggesting that you've made an error in judgment, and you still have time to correct it before this situation escalates further. Turn around. Hands behind your back." Pierce's patience was gone. He grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around with force that sent her stumbling forward. Her prescription bottle fell to the floor, pills scattering across the linoleum like tiny white dice. "Ma'am, I won't ask again." Around them, customers began pulling out phones, some recording, creating digital evidence, others calling for help. The young mother hurried toward the exit, her child crying now. Pierce grabbed Vivian's wrist, yanking her arm behind her back. The force sent sharp pain through her shoulder, arthritis flaring in old joints that protested treatment they were never meant to endure. Vivian's voice remained calm despite the roughness of his grip, despite the humiliation of being manhandled in public while strangers recorded her degradation. "Officer, you're making a serious mistake," Pierce laughed, a sound without humor, without warmth. "The only mistake here is yours, Grandma. Should have stayed home where you belong." The handcuffs clicked shut around Vivian's wrists with a metallic finality that echoed through the pharmacy like a gunshot. The sound cut through normal afternoon conversations about flu shots and vitamins. The gentle hum of air conditioning and soft radio music overhead couldn't mask the sudden, suffocating tension that filled every corner. Pierce yanked her arms tighter, forcing her shoulders back in a position that sent shooting pain down her spine. At 68, her joints protested every movement, but she refused to cry out. She had endured worse indignities in her lifetime, survived worse humiliations during her years growing up in Alabama, though none quite this public, none quite this filmed. "There we go," Pierce announced to the growing crowd of witnesses, satisfaction in his voice. "One less drug dealer on the streets. Keeping Buckhead safe, folks." Vivian felt the cold metal cutting into her wrists where her circulation slowed, where the cuffs dug into aging skin that bruised easily now. Her wedding ring, 47 years of marriage compressed into a simple gold band, pinched painfully against the steel. Tyrone Ellis abandoned his post behind the counter. His pharmacy training forgotten in the face of this nightmare unfolding in real time, he moved around the partition, hands raised in a gesture of peace, of intervention. "Officer, please," Tyrone said, his voice shaking but determined. "Mrs. Langford comes here every month. Same prescription, same insurance card, same story about her husband, Walter. We have her prescription history in our system. 3 years of monthly refills. Never a problem. Never a red flag. I can show you everything." "Step back, sir," Pierce warned, pointing a finger aggressively. "Unless you want to join her in handcuffs for interfering with police business, I suggest you return to your station and stay out of law enforcement matters." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Tyrone's hands shook as he retreated, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, that what he was witnessing was an abuse of power. But intervention could cost him his job, his pharmacy license, his livelihood, maybe even his freedom. The system protected men like Pierce, not men like Tyrone who dared to speak up. Around the pharmacy, more phones emerged from purses and pockets. The businessman held his device steady, recording everything with grim determination. A teenage girl near the greeting cards whispered into her phone, "You need to see this. Some cop is arresting this old lady for literally nothing. It's insane." An older white woman near the cosmetics aisle turned away, unwilling to watch but unable to leave. 2 young men by the beverage coolers recorded from different angles, creating a stereo view of injustice. Vivian's designer navy blazer wrinkled as Pierce pushed her toward the front of the store. Her reading glasses hung crooked from their silver chain, one lens cracked from when he had spun her around. The prescription bottle, Walter's lifeline, still lay scattered on the floor, pills mixing with dust and debris that no one would bother to clean up. Those pills cost money. Without them, Walter's blood pressure would spike. Without them, another stroke became not just possible, but likely. "Walk," Pierce commanded, his hand gripping her elbow with unnecessary force, fingers digging into aging flesh hard enough to leave bruises she would discover later. Each step sent jolts of pain through Vivian's arthritic knees. She stumbled once, her balance not what it used to be, and Pierce jerked her upright without gentleness, without care, like she was cargo instead of a human being. The small crowd parted before them. Some backed away, unwilling to be associated with whatever was happening. Others followed with cameras raised, documenting everything, creating evidence that would be uploaded to social media before Pierce even filed his report. "This is unbelievable," someone whispered, a woman's voice shaking with outrage. "She's someone's grandmother. She's just picking up medication." But Pierce felt vindicated. In his mind, he had done everything by the book. Suspicious behavior? Check. Possible drug trafficking? Check. Resisting cooperation? Check. His body camera had captured what he believed was a clean arrest that would look good in his monthly statistics, that would please Captain Harlan, that would justify his paycheck and his overtime and his position of authority. He didn't notice the way Vivian held herself despite the handcuffs, the straightness of her spine, the careful dignity in each forced step. He didn't see the way she made eye contact with witnesses, not in shame, but in something approaching pity. He didn't recognize that the woman he had arrested was cataloging every word, every action, every violation with the practiced precision of someone who had spent decades prosecuting exactly this kind of abuse. "My husband is expecting me home," Vivian said quietly as they neared the store's entrance. Her voice was calm, measured, the same tone she had used in federal court when addressing defendants. "He'll worry if I'm late. He's recovering from a stroke. Stress could trigger another cardiac event." "Should have thought about that before you started dealing pills, Grandma," Pierce replied without looking at her. The automatic doors slid open, revealing the busy Peachtree Road sidewalk outside. Afternoon traffic rushed past. BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas driven by Buckhead's wealthy residents who lived in a different world, who would never experience what Vivian was experiencing right now. More phones appeared. A woman walking her golden retriever stopped and stared, her hand covering her mouth. A delivery driver parked his truck illegally at the curb and pulled out his device to record, adding his footage to the growing digital evidence. An elderly white man in a suit shook his head in disgust but didn't intervene. No one intervened. Everyone watched. Everyone recorded. No one helped. Pierce guided Vivian toward his patrol car, parked illegally in a handicapped space near the pharmacy entrance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. A police officer violating the law he had sworn to uphold while arresting an innocent woman. Vivian noticed the violation, but said nothing. She had learned over 7 decades of life to pick her battles, to choose her moments, to wait for the right time to strike back. "You can't arrest her for picking up prescription medication," Maya Ellison called out, following them outside. Her voice cracked with emotion and inexperience with confrontation, with standing up to authority. "She has documentation. She has authorization. This is wrong." "Watch me," Pierce replied, opening the patrol car's rear door. The smell hit Vivian immediately. Stale sweat, fear, and industrial-strength disinfectant trying unsuccessfully to mask human misery. The plastic seat was cracked and uncomfortable, patched with duct tape in several places. Pierce placed his hand on her head, pushing down as she was forced to bend into the car. "Careful with your head," he said with mock concern, the kind of false politeness that made the humiliation worse. Tyrone Ellis had also emerged from the store, his manager's badge still pinned to his shirt, his face flushed with anger and helplessness. "She's 68 years old," he said, his voice louder now, braver. "This is an elderly woman picking up her husband's heart medication. You've made a terrible mistake." "Old enough to know better," Pierce shot back, slamming the car door once Vivian was inside. But as Vivian settled into the patrol car's back seat, something in her posture changed. The humiliation was still there, carved into the lines around her eyes, visible in the tightness of her jaw. The pain from the handcuffs still shot through her shoulders, sending pins and needles down her arms. But underneath it all, something else emerged: resolve. Vivian Langford had spent 47 years protecting Walter from stress, shielding him from the ugliness of a world that judged people by their skin color. She had spent decades navigating systems designed to dismiss women who looked like her, systems that questioned her intelligence, her competence, her right to hold power. She had learned patience, diplomacy, and the art of strategic silence. But she had also learned when enough was enough. Pierce walked around to the driver's seat, already composing his police report in his mind. Drug trafficking, resisting arrest, obstruction of justice. Maybe he could add something about threats or suspicious behavior. Make it stick. Make it look clean. 3 arrests before end of shift. Quota met. Captain Harlan would be pleased. He had no idea that the woman sitting handcuffed in his back seat had spent 23 years sentencing people exactly like him, and her patience had just run out. Through the window, Vivian could see the crowd that had gathered. 20, maybe 30 people now. Phones still recording. Witnesses to her humiliation. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others looked away, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth of what they were seeing. A few, God help them, seemed entertained, like this was reality TV come to life. Pierce settled into the driver's seat, adjusting his radio volume. His dashboard computer glowed with arrest forms waiting to be filled out. Drug trafficking. Easy paperwork. Another statistic for his monthly numbers. Another justification for his overtime pay. "Officer Pierce!" Vivian's voice cut through his administrative satisfaction. Her tone had changed. Gone was the confused elderly woman, the compliant victim. What remained was something else entirely, something ancient and powerful and absolutely done with being disrespected. Pierce glanced in the rearview mirror. "Save it for the judge, lady. You'll get your chance to explain yourself in court. I am the judge." The words hung in the patrol car like a physical presence, like gravity had suddenly increased, like the air itself had changed density. Pierce's hand froze on his radio dial. "What did you say?" I said, "I am a federal judge, retired from the Northern District of Georgia, 23 years on the bench." Pierce turned around in his seat, studying her face through the metal grating that separated them. She sat straighter now, despite the handcuffs, despite the pain. Her cracked reading glasses caught the afternoon light, and behind them, her eyes held something Pierce had never seen before in the back of his patrol car. Authority. Real authority. Not the kind that came from a badge and a gun, but the kind that came from decades of holding actual power, actual responsibility, actual justice in her hands. "You're lying." But his voice lacked conviction. Something in her posture, in the way she spoke, made his stomach tighten with the first whisper of doubt. "Run my name through your system," Vivian said calmly, like she was instructing a law clerk on basic procedure. "Vivian Langford, Federal Judicial Database. You'll find my commission papers, my security clearance, my retirement ceremony from 3 years ago. You'll find photographs of me in my robes. You'll find my case history, over 4,000 cases presided over during my tenure." Pierce's hand shook slightly as he reached for his computer terminal. "This isn't possible. Federal judges don't get arrested for drug trafficking. Federal judges don't shop at CVS pharmacies. Federal judges don't sit in handcuffs in the back seats of patrol cars. This is a mistake. This has to be a mistake. But as his fingers typed, Vivian Langford, federal judge, Northern District, the database loaded, and his screen filled with information that made his blood run cold. Judge Vivian M. Langford, appointed years earlier, confirmed by the United States Senate, presided over thousands of cases, specialized in federal criminal law, civil rights violations, and law enforcement misconduct. Pierce stared at the photograph on his screen. Younger, wearing black judicial robes, American flag behind her, but unmistakably, undeniably, the same woman sitting handcuffed in his back seat. The woman he had just arrested for drug trafficking. The woman he had called Grandma and shoved against a pharmacy counter. The woman whose prescription pills were still scattered across the CVS floor. This can't be right, he whispered. But his computer didn't lie. Cross-references confirmed everything. FBI security clearance, Secret Service protection detail during high-profile cases, commendations from attorneys general, awards for judicial excellence, recognition for advancing civil rights. I've sentenced 17 police officers during my tenure, Officer Pierce, Vivian continued, her voice conversational now, almost friendly. Corruption, civil rights violations, excessive force, unlawful arrest. I know your type very well. I've studied men like you for decades. Pierce's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His career, his pension, his future, everything he had worked for over 12 years in law enforcement, suddenly balanced on the edge of a cliff he hadn't seen coming. A cliff he had built himself with his own prejudice and arrogance. The handcuffs are quite tight, Officer Pierce, Vivian continued, like she was discussing the weather. I'd estimate you have about 30 seconds before the crowd outside realizes what you've done. Dozens of people are recording this arrest on their phones. By tonight, this will be national news. By tomorrow, you'll be famous. Not in the way you want. Pierce looked through his windshield at the growing crowd. Phones still raised. The story that would end his career before dinner time. I didn't know, Pierce stammered, his voice barely audible. You didn't identify yourself. You didn't tell me. I shouldn't have needed to. Vivian's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. Every person deserves basic dignity during police interactions, regardless of their profession or position. But you chose intimidation. You chose violence. You chose humiliation. You chose to see a black woman and assume criminality. That's on you, Officer Pierce. That's all on you. Pierce's radio crackled with normal dispatch calls, traffic stops, noise complaints, stolen vehicle reports, while his world collapsed. His hands trembled as he reached for the door handle, reality crashing over him like cold water. Officer Pierce, Vivian said as he prepared to exit the car. Her voice stopped him cold. Before you remove these handcuffs, I want you to understand something very clearly. Pierce paused, his hand frozen on the door. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. And outside, the cameras kept rolling. Lena Caldwell received the tip through a text message from her nephew Jordan, a college student who saw the viral video spreading across social media like wildfire. The message arrived just as she was finishing a story about city council budget disputes. Aunt Lena, cop arrested federal judge at CVS. This is insane. You need to see this. The video link loaded quickly. What Lena saw in the next few minutes made her forget about city council entirely. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's investigative reporter had covered police misconduct for years. Broken stories about excessive force, uncovered corruption in different precincts, but she had never seen footage quite like this. Shaky cell phone video showed an elderly black woman in handcuffs, a navy blazer wrinkled from rough handling, reading glasses hanging crooked from a silver chain. The woman's face was dignified despite everything, calm despite the chaos. The audio quality was poor, wind noise and traffic and multiple people talking over each other. But the visuals told a brutal story that needed no narration. Soon after, Lena had confirmed Vivian Langford's identity through federal judicial records. 23 years on the bench, hundreds of criminal cases, a reputation for fairness that crossed party lines, awards from civil rights organizations, recognition from legal associations. This was the last person who should be faced down in a pharmacy parking lot. Lena's first call went to Tyrone Ellis, whose contact information she found through CVS Corporate. His voice shook as he described the arrest over the phone, recounting details that made her hands tremble while taking notes. "Mrs. Langford comes in monthly," Tyrone said, his words tumbling out fast. "Same prescription, same insurance card, same polite conversation about her husband's health. She asks about my kids. She remembers their names." Officer Pierce treated her like she was running a drug cartel, like she was some kind of criminal mastermind, instead of a retired grandmother picking up heart medication. "Did you try to intervene?" Lena asked, her laptop already open, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I tried to explain that she was a regular customer, that we had documentation, that everything was legitimate. Pierce threatened to arrest me, too. Said I was interfering with police business." Tyrone's voice cracked. "I have a family, Ms. Caldwell. I have a mortgage. I couldn't risk my job, my pharmacy license. But I should have done more. I should have." "You did what you could," Lena said gently, though she was already thinking about the systemic failures that make good people afraid to intervene. "Can you send me the pharmacy security footage from that afternoon?" "Already copied it to a thumb drive," Tyrone replied. "I had a feeling someone would ask." Lena's second call went to the Atlanta Police Department's Public Information Office. The response was predictably defensive, read from a prepared statement. Officer Pierce followed department protocol in investigating suspicious behavior related to potential prescription drug abuse. The department stood behind his actions pending a full investigation. But Lena had been covering APD long enough to read between the lines. Pending investigation meant damage control. Suspicious behavior meant they had no real justification and were scrambling for cover. She requested Pierce's personnel file through open records laws. A PD had 72 hours to respond, but she knew bureaucratic delays when she saw them. This file would be heavily redacted if it came at all. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Helena Shaw, Vivian's personal physician, called Lena directly after seeing the news coverage spreading across local channels. Medical ethics prevented her from discussing specifics about patient care, but she could confirm certain facts that destroyed APD's narrative. "Judge Langford has legal authority to pick up Walter's medications," Dr. Shaw said carefully. "She has medical power of attorney. She has insurance authorization. She has pharmacy verification on file. Everything is properly documented. There's nothing suspicious about her actions. Nothing at all." Lena's next moves required delicate navigation. She reached out to former colleagues of Vivian's from the federal courthouse, retired attorneys, court clerks, other judges who had worked with her over 2 decades. The picture they painted destroyed any narrative about suspicious behavior. "Judge Langford was known for 3 things," said retired District Attorney Charles Morrison, who had prosecuted cases in her courtroom for 15 years: punctuality, preparation, and unwavering ethics. She sentenced corrupt cops before, always with careful attention to evidence and fair sentencing guidelines. Vivian doesn't have a vindictive bone in her body, but she also doesn't tolerate abuse of power. If Pierce thinks this will blow over quietly, he's never dealt with Vivian Langford. In the days that followed, Lena assembled a preliminary profile of Officer Nolan Pierce that made her stomach turn. Through public records requests and anonymous sources within APD, officers tired of watching bad cops destroy the department's reputation A pattern emerged that department leadership clearly hoped would stay buried. Pierce had joined APD 12 years earlier after washing out of the Georgia State Patrol Academy for what training supervisors diplomatically called attitude problems. His evaluation reports noted excessive aggression toward suspects and poor judgment under pressure, red flags that someone in APD's hiring process chose to ignore. The complaint started within his first year on patrol. Mrs. Dorothy Washington, 71 years old, reported that Pierce threw her to the ground during a traffic stop for an expired registration sticker. Her daughter filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. A PD's investigation lasted 2 weeks before concluding there was insufficient evidence. Case closed. 3 months later, another person alleged Pierce used a racial slur during a shoplifting arrest at a Buckhead grocery store. The complaint was dismissed because no other officers witnessed the incident. Pierce's body camera had mysteriously malfunctioned that day, a technical glitch that happened to occur during the exact moments when the alleged slur was used. The pattern continued for 12 years. Elderly defendants, minority families, petty violations escalated to violent arrests, traffic stops that became physical confrontations, investigations of suspicious behavior that somehow always targeted black and brown faces. 12 formal complaints filed with Internal Affairs over 12 years. 12 complaints dismissed or buried in bureaucratic procedures designed to protect officers rather than citizens. 12 victims who learned that the system doesn't believe people like them over cops like Pierce. Lena's computer screen filled with case numbers, complaint forms, and incident reports that read like a masterclass in systematic racism disguised as police work. Pierce didn't just profile Vivian Langford. He had been profiling vulnerable people for over a decade, targeting those least likely to fight back effectively, least likely to have resources or connections or knowledge to challenge his authority. The next significant discovery came through a source deep inside APD who was tired of watching Pierce destroy lives without consequences. Lena obtained the CVS complete security footage from the day of the incident, not just the cell phone videos that went viral, but the professional surveillance system that captured everything Pierce's body camera missed. The timestamp showed Pierce checking his body camera twice during the confrontation with Vivian. Once when he first approached her at the counter, and again when he placed her in handcuffs. Both times he adjusted the angle subtly, deliberately pointing it away from his actions. Intentional obstruction of evidence by an officer who knew exactly what he was doing. But the CVS overhead cameras captured what Pierce tried to hide. Vivian's calm demeanor throughout the encounter, her repeated attempts to explain her legitimate purpose, her polite responses to aggressive questioning. Pierce's escalating aggression despite her compliance. The moment he grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. The force he used pressing her against the wall. The roughness with which he handcuffed a 68-year-old woman who posed zero threat. Most damning was the audio. While Pierce would later claim in his report that Vivian was acting suspiciously and resisting cooperation, the security footage showed something completely different. A polite elderly woman following pharmacy procedures exactly as she had dozens of times before, interrupted by an officer who saw what he wanted to see instead of what was actually happening. Lena's investigation expanded to Pierce's arrest statistics. Through data requests and analysis, she discovered he led his district in arrests of elderly defendants, a category that should be statistically rare. Pierce's arrest rates for prescription-related offenses were triple the department average. The numbers told a story. APD didn't want told. Pierce didn't just make arrests randomly. He targeted specific demographics: elderly people, minorities, anyone who seemed unlikely to fight back effectively. A predator in a uniform protected by a system designed to shield bad cops from consequences. Then came the smoking gun. An anonymous email arrived in Lena's inbox early one morning. The sender's address was encrypted, but the email signature contained an Atlanta PD domain that verified through her authentication software. Someone inside the department was leaking evidence. The email contained Pierce's personal text messages from the day of the incident, extracted from his department-issued phone. The messages were verified through metadata analysis. They were legitimate. One read, "Got a live one at CVS Peachtree. Elderly black female. Time for arrest number 3. Another, "Easy target acquired. She won't even know what hit her." And later, "Oops, might have messed up big. Need cover story ASAP." Pierce wasn't investigating suspicious behavior at all. He was hunting for an easy arrest to meet quotas. Vivian Langford wasn't a criminal suspect. She was prey. Another anonymous message contained internal APD memos from Captain Victor Harlan, Pierce's direct supervisor. The subject lines alone told the story: "Arrest statistics need improvement," and "Performance metrics district behind target." The memos revealed APD's quota system in black and white, despite the department's public denials. Officers were evaluated based on arrest numbers, not crime reduction or community safety. Pierce had been gaming the system for years, targeting vulnerable populations who wouldn't effectively challenge police reports, who didn't have lawyers on speed dial, who assumed the system would never believe them over a cop. Vivian Langford wasn't just unlucky. She was deliberately selected for humiliation because Pierce thought a 68-year-old black woman would be powerless to fight back. He thought wrong. Captain Harlan's response to Pierce's mistake, revealed in leaked text messages, showed the department's true priorities. Instead of disciplining Pierce for false arrest, Harlan instructed him to craft incident reports carefully and emphasize the subject's non-compliance. Cover it up. Protect the officer. Sacrifice justice to maintain the system. Lena stared at her laptop screen, surrounded by evidence of systematic corruption that reached far beyond one racist cop. A PD's leadership knew about Pierce's pattern. They enabled it. They protected it. They planned to cover it up and move on like nothing happened. But they didn't count on Vivian Langford fighting back. They didn't expect a federal judge to have the knowledge, the connections, and the determination to expose their entire system. They thought they could bury this like they had buried 12 previous complaints. The fight was just beginning, and Pierce had no idea what he had unleashed. In the days that followed, Atlanta Police Department's damage control machine kicked into high gear. Captain Harlan called an emergency meeting with department lawyers, public relations staff, and union representatives. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. "We have a problem," Harlan announced, tossing printed screenshots of social media posts across the conference table. They scattered like evidence at a crime scene. Twitter threads with hundreds of thousands of retweets. Facebook posts shared across the country. TikTok videos with millions of views. "The Langford arrest is going viral. We need to contain this before it reaches national news networks." "Too late," someone said. CNN has already picked it up. So has MSNBC. Fox News is running segments. The story has everything cable news loves: race, injustice, power, and a sympathetic victim with credentials that can't be questioned. The first salvo in a PD's defense came through an internal memo marked confidential personnel matter. Officer Pierce was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, which everyone understood meant paid vacation while the department hoped public attention would fade. No discipline, no consequences, just time off with full salary while the victim dealt with trauma and humiliation. Vivian Langford read the memo one morning from her breakfast table where Walter sipped coffee with a trembling hand. His stroke had worsened since the stress of the arrest. The pills scattered across the CVS floor were his last dose before running out. His blood pressure readings had been dangerously high for days. Dr. Bennett wanted to hospitalize him, but Walter refused, insisting he needed to be home, needed to be strong for Vivian. "They think this ends here," Vivian told Walter quietly, folding the memo carefully and setting it beside her coffee cup. "Administrative leave. A few weeks of paid time off, then back to normal. Business as usual." Walter's speech slurred slightly, the stroke's lingering effects made worse by stress. What will you do?" Vivian reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. Even through his weakness, she could feel the strength that had sustained them through 47 years of marriage, through civil rights struggles and professional challenges and the daily indignities of living while Black in America. "What I've always done," she said simply. "Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Trust the system I spent my career serving. Demand justice not just for me, but for everyone Pierce has hurt." That afternoon brought the first direct threat. Vivian's phone rang. She answered, expecting Dr. Bennett with Walter's test results. Instead, heavy breathing filled the line. Then a gravelly voice distorted through obvious digital alteration. "Drop this, Judge. You don't know who you're messing with. Walk away while you still can." The line went dead. Vivian wrote down the time and caller ID information. Unknown number. Location blocked. In her legal notebook. 40 years of judicial experience had taught her that anonymous threats usually meant you were over the target. When they threaten you, you're winning. The harassment escalated over the following days. Strange cars parked outside their townhouse at odd hours. Different vehicles, different license plates, but always the same pattern. Someone drove by slowly, stopped across the street, watched their home for 20 or 30 minutes, then left. Hang-up calls at all hours of the night, destroying any chance of rest. Walter's anxiety spiked with each incident, his blood pressure monitor showing readings that terrified Vivian. One morning, someone left a dead rat on their front steps. A note attached read, "Snitches end up like this." Vivian photographed everything. The rat, the note, the strange car's license plates, the call records. Evidence. Always gather evidence. She considered calling the police, then laughed bitterly at the irony. Call the police about police harassment. Walter's health deteriorated with each incident. His cardiologist increased his medication dosage, warned about stress-induced cardiac events, suggested that perhaps Vivian should consider dropping the complaint for her husband's well-being. The implication was clear. Your principles aren't worth your husband's life. Vivian considered it. For the first time since the arrest, she genuinely considered accepting injustice to protect Walter. She lay awake one night, listening to him breathe, watching the rise and fall of his chest, knowing that stress could kill him as surely as any bullet. But the next morning brought news that hardened her resolve. Lena Caldwell's investigation published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with devastating detail. The front page featured a photo of Vivian in her judicial robes next to her arrest photo. The contrast was damning. The headline read, "Federal Judge Arrested for Picking Up Medication. APD's Pattern of Targeting Vulnerable Populations Exposed." The article detailed Pierce's 12-year pattern of abuse, the quota system, the cover-ups, the dozen victims who had tried to seek justice and were silenced by a system designed to protect bad cops. Lena didn't pull punches. She named names, cited evidence, provided documentation that APD couldn't dismiss or deny. A PD's response was swift and vicious. Captain Harlan held a press conference that afternoon, flanked by police union lawyers and department officials wearing their dress uniforms. A show of force meant to intimidate, to overwhelm, to remind everyone who held real power. Harlan's prepared statement was a masterclass in victim blaming disguised as professional concern. He spoke with the practiced authority of someone who had given these statements before, who knew exactly how to manipulate public perception. After reviewing all available evidence, we find that Officer Pierce followed appropriate protocols in investigating suspicious behavior at a known location for prescription drug diversion. Harlan read from his statement, never looking up, never making eye contact with the cameras. While we regret any misunderstanding with Mrs. Langford, our officers must make split-second decisions to protect public safety. We stand behind Officer Pierce and his conduct during this incident. A reporter from the Journal-Constitution raised her hand. Captain Harlan, how do you explain the text messages showing Pierce planned to target elderly suspects? Harlan's jaw tightened visibly, the muscle twitching beneath his skin. We don't comment on alleged evidence that may have been obtained illegally. However, I will note that Mrs. Langford has a history of anti-police bias in her judicial rulings. This appears to be a pattern of activism rather than a legitimate complaint. Some people look for reasons to attack law enforcement, and we believe that's what's happening here. The press conference was a declaration of war. A PD wasn't just defending Pierce. They were attacking Vivian's reputation, her judicial record, her credibility, her life's work. They were sending a message: fight us and we'll destroy you. The next day brought an escalation Vivian didn't expect and couldn't prepare for. Walter collapsed in their kitchen while making breakfast. Vivian found him unconscious on the tile floor, a coffee mug shattered beside him, ceramic shards mixing with spilled coffee that pooled around his head. She called 911, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the buttons. The paramedics arrived quickly, working efficiently, loading Walter onto a stretcher while checking vitals that made them exchange worried glances. The ambulance ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and medical jargon. Vivian didn't fully understand. Blood pressure 210/130, heart rate irregular, possible myocardial infarction. Dr. Elias Bennett met them in the emergency room, his face grave. Stress-induced hypertensive crisis, he explained after initial examination. His body can't handle the current pressure levels. We need to stabilize him immediately. But Mrs. Langford, you need to understand, another incident like this could be fatal. His heart can't take much more. Vivian sat beside Walter's hospital bed in the cardiac care unit, watching monitors that measured his declining health in real time. Green lines tracking heartbeats, red numbers showing blood pressure. His hand felt fragile in hers, the skin paper-thin and cold despite the heated blanket nurses draped over him. The cost of fighting injustice had always been high. She had known that when she chose to become a federal prosecutor, when she accepted appointment to the bench, when she sentenced her first corrupt cop. But she had never imagined it might cost Walter's life, never imagined that standing up for justice could mean losing the person she loved most in the world. Later that day, Captain Harlan made a personal visit to the hospital. He arrived in full uniform, projecting authority even here in the cardiac care unit, where his badge meant nothing, where the only authority that mattered belonged to doctors and nurses who actually saved lives instead of destroying them. Nurses whispered as he passed through the corridor, recognizing power when they saw it, recognizing threat disguised as official business. "Judge Langford," Harlan said, settling into the visitor's chair uninvited, crossing his legs like they were old friends meeting for casual conversation, instead of adversaries in a war he had started. "I'm sorry about your husband's condition. That's a difficult situation for any family." Vivian studied his face, reading decades of police politics in his expression. The careful neutrality that hid real thoughts. The practiced sympathy that felt as authentic as plastic flowers. "Are you here officially, Captain? I'm here as someone who wants to resolve this situation quietly for everyone's benefit," Harlan said. He placed a folder on Walter's bedside table right next to the monitors, tracking her husband's fragile heartbeat. Pierce made a mistake. We acknowledge that privately, if not publicly. But dragging this through federal court won't help anyone. Your husband needs peace and quiet to recover. We can arrange early retirement for Pierce, full pension, clean record. Everyone moves on. Life returns to normal. And my humiliation? Vivian asked quietly. The pattern of abuse? The other victims? What happens to them in your quiet resolution? Harlan shrugged. A gesture so casual, so dismissive of human suffering that Vivian felt her blood pressure rise to match Walter's dangerous levels. Sometimes justice isn't perfect, Judge. Sometimes it's about what's practical, what's achievable. You can't save everyone. You can't fix every systemic problem. But you can save yourself, and you can save your husband. Vivian opened the folder. Inside was Pierce's resignation letter, pre-signed and dated. A department statement calling the arrest an unfortunate miscommunication. No admission of wrongdoing. No systemic change. No acknowledgement of the dozen other victims who had suffered in silence, who didn't have federal judgeships to protect them. 24 hours, Harlan said, standing and smoothing his uniform. After that, this gets ugly for everyone involved. We'll leak your judicial records, find every unpopular decision, every sentence some victim's family disagreed with. We'll make you the villain, Judge Langford. We're very good at that. Vivian watched him leave, his polished shoes squeaking against the hospital linoleum. Through Walter's window, she could see downtown Atlanta's skyline, the federal courthouse where she had spent 23 years defending justice against exactly this kind of corruption, exactly this kind of threat. Walter stirred in his sleep, monitors beeping steadily. His medication schedule was finally stabilized, but his stress levels remained dangerously high. One more shock, one more crisis, and his heart might simply give up. Vivian knew that accepting Harlan's deal would protect Walter's health, end the harassment, restore their peaceful retirement. She knew that continuing to fight might kill the man she had loved for 47 years. She also knew it would condemn future victims to the same treatment she had endured. Pierce would walk away unpunished, free to terrorize other vulnerable people under color of authority, free to continue his pattern of abuse against people who didn't have judicial connections or media attention or resources to fight back. For the first time in 47 years of marriage, Vivian Langford faced an impossible choice: protect her husband or protect justice, love or duty, personal peace or public good. She watched Walter sleep, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision, and realized she couldn't make this decision alone. When he woke, if he woke, she would ask him. They had made every important decision together for 47 years. This one, the most important of all, would be no different. Outside Walter's window, dawn broke over Atlanta, and Vivian had to somehow find a way to choose between everything she loved and everything she believed. The next afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Walter's hospital room. Judge Helena Shaw, Vivian's former colleague from the federal courthouse, arrived carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of controlled fury that Vivian recognized from countless courtroom battles. Helena didn't bother with pleasantries. "I saw the mayor's press conference," she said without preamble, setting her briefcase on the small table near the window. "What they're doing to you is unconscionable, Vivian. Absolutely unconscionable." Vivian looked up from Walter's bedside, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. She hadn't slept properly in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her usually perfect posture had collapsed under the weight of impossible choices. "Helena, I appreciate you coming, but—" "No." Helena's voice carried the same authority that had commanded federal courtrooms for years, that made unprepared attorneys tremble and made veteran prosecutors sharpen their arguments. You're not doing this alone anymore. Helena opened her briefcase, revealing a stack of documents bound with red legal ribbon, official letterhead from the Federal Judges Association, signatures from judges Vivian had known for decades, some retired, some still active, all lending their reputations to her cause. 12 federal judges from our district signed this letter, Helena explained, sliding the document across to Vivian. We're filing an amicus brief supporting your civil rights lawsuit. Pro bono representation from a top civil rights firm. Full backing of the Federal Judges Association. Financial support for legal costs, expert witnesses, everything you need. Vivian stared at the papers, hardly daring to believe what she was reading. Names of respected jurists she had known for decades. They were all here, all risking political capital, all standing with her against APD's machine. Why? Vivian whispered. Why would they risk this? Harlan will come after them too. The police union will target them. This could affect pending cases, create conflicts. Because we've all seen Pierce's type before, Helena interrupted, her voice hard. Bullies with badges who think federal judges are just old people they can intimidate. Today, they learn differently. Today, they learned that attacking one of us means fighting all of us. The next morning transformed Vivian's isolation into something resembling hope. Walter's room phone rang constantly with calls of support. Retired attorneys offering legal assistance. Law school classmates sharing their own encounters with police misconduct. Former defendants whose cases Vivian had handled fairly regardless of their race or economic status, calling to say they remembered her kindness, her fairness, her refusal to let prejudice influence her courtroom. Dr. Adrian Cole, Atlanta's most prominent civil rights attorney, arrived that afternoon with an offer Vivian could barely process. She had seen him on television, read about his victories against police departments across the South. He was a legend, a giant in civil rights law, and he was standing in Walter's hospital room, offering to represent her. My firm will handle your federal lawsuit at no cost, Dr. Cole said, his deep voice carrying certainty and strength. We've been waiting years for a case this clear-cut. Pierce handed us everything we need. Video evidence, text messages, body camera footage showing intentional misconduct. This isn't just about you, Judge Langford. This is about changing a system that protects bad cops at the expense of vulnerable citizens. I don't understand, Vivian said, still struggling to believe this was real. Why would you take this pro bono? Your time is worth thousands per hour. This case could drag on for years. Because Pierce arrested a federal judge for being black in Buckhead, Dr. Cole replied bluntly, his eyes intense. If that's not worth fighting, nothing is. This case can set precedent that protects millions of people from exactly what happened to you. That's worth more than any fee. The following day brought the breakthrough that changed everything. Tyrone Ellis, the CVS pharmacy manager, called Vivian's cell phone. His voice shook with excitement and nervousness. Judge Langford, I found something. I've been reviewing our security footage from the weeks before your arrest, and Pierce came into our store 3 times last month. Not for arrest, just walking around watching customers, especially elderly customers. I have footage of him studying people, taking notes in a little notebook. He was conducting surveillance, building target lists. The revelation hit Vivian like a physical impact. Pierce didn't randomly select her. He researched her, profiled her, chose her for maximum humiliation, maximum statistical padding. This wasn't spontaneous law enforcement. It was premeditated persecution. I'm sending you the files now, Tyrone continued. Encrypted email, time-stamped footage showing Pierce's pattern. This proves planning, Judge Langford. This proves intent. The next morning brought the most powerful support yet. Mrs. Dorothy Washington, the 71-year-old woman Pierce had assaulted during a traffic stop years earlier, arrived at the hospital with her daughter and granddaughter. 3 generations of women who had survived Pierce's brutality, who had lived with the trauma of police violence, who had carried the burden of injustice and silence because they thought no one would believe them. "I never had the strength to fight him alone, Mrs. Langford," Dorothy said, her voice quiet but determined. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the hospital room. "My daughter filed a complaint, but Internal Affairs dismissed it. Said there wasn't enough evidence. Said it was my word against a police officer's. And who were they going to believe? I felt so powerless, so angry, so ashamed that I couldn't protect myself." Her daughter Michelle spoke next. "When I saw your video, when I saw what Pierce did to you, I knew we had to come forward. You're fighting back. You're not letting them silence you. That gives us courage to tell our stories, too." Dorothy's granddaughter, a college student named Jasmine, held up her phone. "It's going viral on campus. Everyone's talking about it. My generation won't stay silent about this anymore. We're done accepting police brutality as normal." Vivian felt tears threatening for the first time since the arrest. Not tears of weakness or defeat, but tears of recognition. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. Pierce's victims had been waiting for someone with resources and knowledge and determination to stand up and say, "Enough." By that evening, 7 other Pierce victims had contacted Dr. Cole's office. Elderly defendants, minority families, vulnerable people who thought they had no voice against police power, each one adding their story, their evidence, their testimony to a growing case that APD couldn't dismiss or bury or intimidate into silence. National attention soon transformed the story from local controversy to national crisis. Major news networks picked up Lena Caldwell's investigation, running segments that dissected every aspect of Pierce's arrest record. Prominent anchors interviewed Vivian via video call from her hospital room. Her answers were measured, calm, judicial. Some people were saying she should have simply complied with Officer Pierce's requests. How did she respond? "I did comply," Vivian said. "I explained my purpose. I offered documentation. I remained polite despite aggressive questioning." Compliance doesn't protect people of color from police violence. History proves that repeatedly. Compliance didn't protect Philando Castile. Compliance didn't protect Sandra Bland. The problem isn't victim behavior. The problem is officers who see certain skin colors and assume criminality. Major newspapers published scathing pieces. Congressional representatives from Georgia demanded federal oversight of Atlanta police practices. The Department of Justice announced a preliminary inquiry into APD's pattern and practice of discriminatory policing. Walter squeezed Vivian's hand during one evening's news coverage. His speech had improved slightly. Stress reduction and aggressive medication management were helping. He could speak in short sentences now, though each word required visible effort. "Proud of you," he managed to whisper, his eyes bright with tears and love and determination. "So proud." Vivian looked around Walter's hospital room, now filled with flowers from supporters, legal briefs from colleagues, contact information from dozens of people offering help. For the first time since the arrest, she realized she wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had resources, allies, advocates who believed her story and wanted justice, not just for her, but for everyone Pierce had hurt. And somewhere in Atlanta, Officer Nolan Pierce was about to learn that attacking a federal judge was merely the beginning of his nightmare. The real consequences were just starting to unfold. Lena Caldwell received an encrypted email early one morning that changed everything. The sender identified himself only as a friend in blue, an obviously fake name. But the Atlanta PD email signature that followed checked out through every verification system she ran. Someone inside the department was leaking evidence, and what they were sending was explosive enough to blow apart APD's entire defense. Pierce isn't working alone. Check Officer Carlos Rivera's body camera from a previous date. Audio file attached. You'll want to hear this. Multiple officers involved. Chain of command aware. This goes higher than anyone knows. Lena downloaded the audio file with trembling fingers. Her coffee forgotten as the recording played through her laptop speakers. What she heard made her heart pound, and her journalistic instinct scream that this was the smoking gun. Officer Carlos Rivera had been Pierce's partner that day, assigned to patrol Buckhead's pharmacy district together. His body camera was supposedly inactive during Vivian's arrest, a technical malfunction according to the official report. The audio file proved that was a lie. The recording captured Pierce's voice minutes before he entered the CVS, coordinating with Rivera through their patrol car radio. Target acquired at CVS Peachtree. Elderly black female alone reading prescription labels too carefully. Perfect stats padding. Rivera responded immediately. Copy that. I'll maintain the perimeter. Keep civilians back when you make the arrest. Remember accidental camera malfunction if things get messy. Captain wants clean paperwork on this quota push. Lena rewound the audio multiple times, hardly believing what she was hearing. This wasn't a spontaneous arrest based on suspicious behavior. This was a coordinated operation planned between two officers designed specifically to manufacture arrests for statistical purposes. They discussed it like a military operation, like they were taking down a dangerous criminal instead of terrorizing an elderly woman picking up medication. "How do you want to play this?" Rivera asked in the recording. "Standard intimidation," Pierce replied, his voice casual, relaxed, like he was discussing dinner plans. "Make her feel powerless. Get compliance through fear. These elderly types always fold under pressure. Quick arrest. Minimal resistance. Good stats. What if she has legitimate prescriptions? What if everything checks out? Doesn't matter." Pierce laughed. Actually laughed. "By the time she proves innocence, arrest stats are already logged. Captain only cares about numbers, not outcomes. Besides, who's going to believe some old black lady over a police officer? The system's rigged in our favor, man. Always has been." Lena called Dr. Cole immediately. "I have the smoking gun. Pierce planned this arrest. Rivera was complicit. A PD command structure knew about quota manipulation. This isn't just misconduct. This is criminal conspiracy." The audio file reached Vivian through Dr. Cole's encrypted phone call. She listened in Walter's hospital room, watching her husband's face as Pierce's words destroyed any remaining doubt about his motivations, any lingering hope that this was somehow a misunderstanding or an honest mistake. These elderly types always fold under pressure. Walter's blood pressure monitor showed his fury despite his weakened condition. The numbers climbed. His face flushed red. "Bastards," he whispered with more clarity than he had managed in days, with more strength than Vivian had heard since his collapse. "They're all bastards." But the audio contained more than Pierce's confession. In the background, dispatch radio captured fragments of other conversations, revealing the scope of APD's corruption. Lena's digital forensics expert enhanced the audio, isolated the background chatter, and what emerged was damning. 3 other elderly target arrests were logged that same afternoon across different districts. This wasn't isolated misconduct. This was a systematic campaign. Lena's investigation expanded exponentially. Through careful analysis of APD arrest records, she discovered Pierce and Rivera had been coordinating these arrests for over a year and a half. Dozens of elderly defendants arrested on prescription-related charges. Statistical manipulation designed to justify budget increases, overtime pay, and the appearance of proactive policing. Vivian recognized the legal implications immediately. This wasn't just a civil rights violation. This was criminal conspiracy under federal racketeering statutes. RICO charges. Pierce, Rivera, and their commanding officers could face potential federal prosecution, prison time, complete destruction of their careers and reputations. Confirmation came that the audio was authentic. FBI digital analysis, requested through channels Vivian still had access to from her judicial career, verified the recording's legitimacy. This evidence supports federal charges against multiple APD officers. An FBI agent told Dr. Cole directly, "We're opening a criminal investigation, civil rights violations under color of authority, conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights, wire fraud related to false arrest statistics. This is going to be big." Captain Harlan learned about the audio through APD's internal security breach investigation. Someone was leaking confidential body camera files to the press, which meant either a whistleblower inside the department or a massive security failure. Either way, Harlan's career was circling the drain. He immediately called an emergency meeting with union lawyers and department officials. The conference room felt smaller now, claustrophobic. The walls closing in as Harlan realized his protective bubble was collapsing. "We have a problem," Harlan told the assembled officials, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Pierce's operation is blown. Federal charges are coming. We need complete separation from this disaster before it takes down the entire department." The next morning, APD announced Rivera's suspension and Pierce's termination for conduct unbecoming a police officer. The statement was carefully worded, legally vetted, designed to minimize liability while creating distance. No mention of federal investigation, no mention of criminal charges, no admission of systemic problems. Just 2 officers being thrown overboard to save the ship. Pierce received his termination notice through certified mail. After 12 years of protected misconduct, his career ended with a form letter and a confiscated badge. But the termination letter was meaningless compared to what was coming. Federal prosecutors were already preparing arrest warrants, criminal charges that would strip away his pension, his freedom, his future. For Vivian Langford, this wasn't about Pierce's career anymore. The audio evidence proved systematic corruption reaching through APD's command structure, touching dozens of officers, affecting hundreds of victims. Individual justice had become institutional accountability, and federal agents were just getting started. The Atlanta City Council emergency session convened that evening in the municipal building downtown. Every seat was filled an hour before the meeting started. News cameras lined the back wall. Local station, national networks, international media. This story had traveled far beyond Atlanta, becoming a symbol of systemic injustice that resonated across America and beyond. Vivian Langford entered through the main doors, walking slowly but steadily with Walter's arm linked through hers. Walter had insisted on attending despite Dr. Bennett's vehement protests, despite the risk to his fragile health. His speech remained slurred, his steps unsteady. But his presence beside Vivian sent a message that resonated through the packed chamber. This family would not be intimidated. They would not be silent. They would not go away. The crowd stood as they entered, spontaneous emotional applause that built to a roar. Strangers who had seen the videos, who had read the stories, who recognized injustice when they saw it. Vivian felt tears threatening but blinked them back. She had spent 40 years maintaining judicial composure. She wouldn't lose it now, not when the fight was just beginning. City Council Chair Amanda Foster called for order, her gavel striking before the crowd settled into tense, expectant silence. This emergency session addresses recent allegations regarding Atlanta Police Department procedures and the arrest of Judge Vivian Langford. We've reviewed extensive evidence, heard from multiple witnesses, and consulted with legal experts. Tonight, we seek truth and accountability. Nolan Pierce sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his union attorney and 2 APD officials wearing dress uniforms. His face was pale, drawn. Gone was the swagger from the day of the arrest. The confident brutality of a man who believed himself untouchable. What remained was someone watching their life collapse in real time. Someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. Councilmember David Carter, a retired civil rights attorney with decades of experience fighting police misconduct, spoke first. Officer Pierce, you are under oath. Do you swear that your testimony here tonight will be truthful and complete? Pierce raised his right hand, his voice barely audible. Yes. Dr. Adrian Cole stood to address the council, his presence commanding immediate attention. Council members, distinguished guests, citizens of Atlanta, we present audio evidence that fundamentally alters the nature of this case. Evidence that proves premeditation, coordination, and systematic abuse of authority. The chamber fell silent as Rivera's body camera audio played through the sound system. Pierce's voice filled the room with damning clarity that no amount of legal maneuvering could soften or excuse. Target acquired, elderly black female, perfect stats padding. Gasps rippled through the audience. Several council members leaned forward, studying Pierce's reaction. His face drained of remaining color as his own words condemned him, and every excuse crumbled. These elderly types always fold under pressure. Walter Langford squeezed Vivian's hand so hard it hurt. Around them, witnesses from the day of the arrest nodded in recognition. Tyrone Ellis, sitting a few rows back, shook his head in disgust. Maya Ellison, the young pharmacy technician, wiped tears from her eyes. The audio continued. Pierce laughing about rigged systems, discussing how to manufacture arrests, coordinating with Rivera to create false narratives. Every word another nail in his career's coffin. Council Chair Foster addressed Pierce directly once the audio ended. Officer Pierce, do you deny that these are your words? Do you deny planning this arrest for statistical purposes rather than legitimate law enforcement? Pierce's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. 30 seconds of absolute quiet in a chamber filled with hundreds of people. Everyone holding their breath, waiting for an answer that everyone already knew. I was following departmental procedures for investigating suspicious, Pierce stammered. Vivian Langford rose from her seat, her voice cutting through his stammered excuse like a blade through fog. The entire chamber turned to look at her. Even the news cameras shifted focus, recognizing a moment of significance. You called me a target. You planned my humiliation. You laughed about elderly people folding under pressure. You coordinated with other officers to manufacture false arrests. You treated me and countless others as prey rather than citizens deserving respect and dignity. The chamber erupted in murmurs that Foster's gavel couldn't quite silence. Vivian continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. 40 years of judicial authority flowing through her. For 23 years, I sentenced officers who violated their oaths. I showed mercy when possible, severity when necessary, always guided by evidence and justice. But I never encountered someone who took such pleasure in cruelty, someone who weaponized their badge to terrorize vulnerable people for career advancement. Pierce tried to respond, but Vivian wasn't finished. Her voice filled the chamber with moral clarity that left no room for excuses or justifications. You didn't see a suspicious person that afternoon. You saw an opportunity to abuse power without consequences. You saw someone you thought was powerless, an elderly black woman who you assumed would fold, would accept humiliation, would disappear quietly. You saw exactly what your prejudices wanted you to see instead of what was actually there. A human being with dignity, rights, and the determination to demand justice. The chamber erupted in applause, thunderous, sustained, emotional. Foster's gavel struck repeatedly before order returned. Pierce's attorney pulled him aside for whispered consultation. When they returned to the table, Pierce spoke in a barely audible voice. "I resigned from the Atlanta Police Department, effective immediately." The chamber erupted again, but Vivian remained standing, her judicial composure intact despite the emotions swirling through the room. "Resignation is not justice," she declared, her voice cutting through the celebration. "Federal charges are pending. Other victims deserve accountability. This ends when the system changes, not when one officer quits to avoid consequences. Real justice requires institutional reform, not individual scapegoating." Council Chair Foster gavelled for order as Pierce stood to leave. Camera flashes illuminated his walk toward the exit, documenting his fall from authority to disgrace, from protected abuser to exposed criminal. The uniform that once shielded him from accountability now marked him as everything wrong with American policing. But as Pierce disappeared through the chamber doors, Vivian knew this victory was just the beginning of real change. Rivera faced charges. Captain Harlan faced investigation. A PD faced federal oversight. The system that protected them for decades finally faced consequences. Vivian Langford picked up Walter's heart medication at the same CVS on Peachtree Road. The prescription number remained unchanged, but everything else had changed in ways both small and profound. Tyrone Ellis greeted her with a warm smile, asking about Walter's recovery with genuine interest rather than perfunctory politeness. "How's he doing with the physical therapy? I heard he's walking 2 miles a day now." 3 miles yesterday," Vivian replied, pride evident in her voice. "His speech is almost back to normal. His cardiologist says his heart is stronger than it's been in years. Turns out, removing constant stress does wonders for cardiac health. No suspicious glances, no second-guessing her purpose, no treating her like a criminal. Just normal courtesy extended to a regular customer. The dignity every person deserves." Nolan Pierce sat in federal prison serving 18 months for civil rights violations and conspiracy. Rivera received 12 months. Both convictions included provisions stripping them of law enforcement certifications, ensuring they could never wear badges again. Their appeals were denied. Justice, slow but certain, finally arrived. Captain Harlan took early retirement after FBI investigation revealed years of departmental quota corruption. The investigation uncovered emails, memos, and recorded conversations proving Harlan knew about and encouraged officers to target vulnerable populations for easy arrests. He lost his pension. He faced potential charges. His legacy was destroyed. Walter's health improved dramatically once the stress subsided. His speech returned to near-normal clarity. His smile was brighter, his hands steadier. He walked 3 miles daily, volunteered at their church, tended the magnolia trees in their front yard. The man who nearly died from stress-induced cardiac events was thriving again, freed from the constant anxiety of fighting injustice. Atlanta PD implemented sweeping reforms. New policies prohibiting arrest quotas, requiring supervisor approval for prescription-related arrests, mandating de-escalation training, installing citizen oversight boards with real authority. The changes came too late for Pierce's victims, but they would protect future citizens from similar abuse. Pierce's 12 victims received settlement payments ranging from $50,000 to $200,000. Acknowledgement that money couldn't erase trauma, but could provide some measure of recognition. Dorothy Washington used her settlement to start a police accountability organization. Others invested in education, therapy, community programs that addressed the root causes of police violence. But Vivian's greatest victory sat in their townhouse passenger seat, humming softly to the radio as she drove home. Walter, alive and recovering, his hand resting on hers as traffic moved around them. Sometimes justice wears reading glasses and carries heart medication. Sometimes it speaks 5 words that change everything. Sometimes it requires an elderly woman to teach powerful people about real strength and the cost of prejudice. Vivian Langford proved that dignity cannot be handcuffed, that truth cannot be silenced, that injustice, delayed but never denied, always finds its way into light. The story of Vivian Langford and Nolan Pierce is more than one woman's fight against one bad cop. It's about systems that protect abusers, about courage in the face of intimidation, about the power of evidence and persistence, and refusing to accept injustice as normal. It's about the dozens of Pierce's victims who suffered in silence until someone with resources fought back. It's about Tyrone Ellis and Maya, and the unnamed witnesses who recorded evidence despite fear of retaliation. It's about Lena Caldwell's investigative journalism, exposing corruption that departments wanted buried. It's about Walter Langford, whose love sustained Vivian through the hardest fight of her life. Most importantly, it's about the truth that power, real power, doesn't come from badges or handcuffs or threats. Real power comes from standing up when it's easier to sit down, from speaking truth when silence is safer, from demanding justice when accepting injustice would cost less. Vivian Langford taught Nolan Pierce exactly who belongs where. He belongs in prison, stripped of the authority he abused. She belongs wherever she chooses: pharmacy, courthouse, home, community, living with a dignity he tried to steal but could never touch. Your voice matters. Your story matters. When you see injustice, speak up, record it, share it, demand accountability. Because change doesn't come from silence. It comes from people like Vivian Langford, who refuse to fold under pressure, who teach systems that protecting bad cops costs more than confronting them. Justice delayed is painful. But justice achieved, even imperfectly, even slowly, proves that truth is more powerful than authority, that courage outlasts intimidation, and that sometimes an elderly woman with reading glasses and a prescription bottle can change an entire system by simply refusing to accept what's wrong as normal. If this story moved you, if Vivian's courage inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories about courage, justice, and people who refuse to fold under pressure. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Pierce realized who he had arrested? The audio recordings proving conspiracy? Walter's collapse from stress? Vivian's testimony at the city council? Tell us below. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because these stories about real people fighting real injustice, matter. They remind us that change is possible when we refuse to accept abuse as normal. When we document evidence, when we support each other, when we demand that systems serve justice instead of protecting power. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, more proof that your voice matters and your actions can change the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about justice. And remember, when you see something wrong, speak up. You never know whose life you might change, whose story you might help tell, whose justice you might help achieve. Until next time, stay strong, stand tall, and never stop fighting for what's right.